"Husband, I'm planning to take a concubine." Duanqing said this while I was ironing his ceremonial robe for tomorrow's palace visit. Upon hearing this, I nearly knocked over the iron pot filled with burning coals. He sat with his legs crossed, talking to himself. "I'm going to bring Miss Zhou into the household, a noblewoman from the previous dynasty. You've met her. When I was following the emperor to conquer the land, my head was practically tucked in my belt. Now that I'm made a duke, what is wrong with taking in a legitimate daughter from a marquis household? Old Han and his family illiterate country bumpkins, even they married a young lady from an earl's household as a second wife." Looking at the matter Genev Dan fact expression on his face, I took a deep breath. What was meant to come has finally come. At 30 Gen 8 years old, having suffered alongside him for half a lifetime, it was time I enjoyed some peace and comfort, and so in my 30 Gen 9th year, I decided to become a merry widow and enjoy the good life, Miss Zhou, a legitimate daughter of nobility from the previous dynasty. At the imperial banquet, Miss Zhou walked past him holding a wine cup, her eyes glancing at him slightly from the corner, and Duanqing's eyeballs nearly stuck to her. I clenched my fists and looked up at him. He had been holding back these words for a long time at court, at imperial banquets. Those pedantic old officials who were fortunate enough to be kept on always cast sidelong glances at him, mocking his vulgarity. But then they'd turn around with fawning smiles, wanting to push their daughters on him as concubines. Lady Zhou, legitimate daughter of a marquise's household from the previous dynasty. Her ancestors had been wealthy for 5 generations, and she grew up in a nest of silk and brocade. Even though she has fallen on hard times now, that air of nobility she carries. Even though I'm honored as the wife of a duke, I still have to feel ashamed of myself in comparison. People like Duanqing, I understand them all too well. People who crawled up from the mud, suddenly wealthy. What they fear most is others calling them uncouth. Marrying a noblewoman is both a status symbol and the best shortcut to shedding labels like mud and legs and vulgar warrior. So he wants to bring a noblewoman from the previous dynasty through his doors. First, to show those sour scholars, and second, because his urgent desire to enjoy himself has taken over. "Madam," he called me in that affected tone, biting down especially hard on the word madam, as if reminding me, he is now a duke of the current dynasty, and I'm just a wife from humble beginnings with no power or influence, who can only bask in her husband's glory, so I should know my place. Not a word about how back then, when he was defeated in battle and fled into the mountains, I carried 2 steamed buns and walked for a day and a night to find him. When I found him, he was already unconscious with fever. I carried him out for 30 li. Back then, he grabbed my hand and said, "When this old man makes it big, I'll make you a titled lady." Now I am a titled lady. And then what? He stands before me, spit flying onto my face, telling me he is taking a concubine. I folded up my court dress and said softly, "De Lang has spent half his life in military campaigns. He should indeed enjoy some peace and comfort." That Duanqing had thoughts of taking a concubine, I'm not surprised at all. Those old friends who fought alongside him to conquer the world after achieving success and fame, which one of them hasn't taken concubines last month? I went to the Marquis of Jembei's manor to visit Linlin, me good sister from the old days. After not seeing her for 3 months, she had become so thin she was unrecognizable. Linlin lay alone on the bed, her face a sallow yellow, her breath barely there. She gripped my hand, tears streaming down her face. "Rise in rank, gain wealth, abandon the original wife. This is our fate." Back then, she knelt in the snow and kowtowed until her head bled, begging for a dose of medicine for her man. Now she lies here, with no one caring about her. Her man is over at the concubine's place, reveling night after night. The wife who suffered through all the hardships with him lies in bed, rotting away alone. Faye, that woman, wore all red on her first day entering the house. My man said, "She is just a child who doesn't know better. Why bother with her?" She gripped my hand tightly. Latter, she didn't know better single day. Coming late to pay respects, didn't know better. Eating my bird's nest soup, didn't know better. Talking back to me in front of guests, didn't know better. Me man told me to be more tolerant. Fei Shi suddenly laughed, tears overflowing from her eyes, streaming down her cheeks and soaking into the pillow. Only then did I notice that the pillow embroidered with gold thread had turned dark yellow all over. That woman even falsely accused me of causing her miscarriage, but she wasn't even pregnant. Yet Lu Cheng, that blind fool, knocked me to the ground without a second word. Not only did he curse me for being vicious, he also confined me to my quarters and stripped me of my housekeeping authority. That fierce lady from the Dingguo Marquis household across the street. When her man wanted to take a concubine, she chopped a blade into the doorframe. The whole city cursed her as a jealous shrew, but her man stayed by her side. Meanwhile, I, the virtuous wife, was ruined by that woman and left barely clinging to life. Mustering her strength, she gripped my hand tightly. If Duanqing ever gets such ideas, you must never let those noble ladies from the former dynasty through the door. They've fallen into the mud, and they'll grab at any straw to climb back up. They'll use any means necessary and cast aside all shame. We can't fight against them. Those words seemed to drain all her remaining strength. After gasping for quite a while, she said in a voice faint as a thread, "Fortunately, Duanqing isn't that kind of man. You're blessed with good fortune." At the time, I could only give her a bitter smile. Among all US wives who shared hardship with our husbands, I was indeed relatively fortunate. With the new emperor ascending the throne and lavishly enfeoffing his loyal supporters, these rough men all let their lustful thoughts run wild, making taking concubines the fashion. Only Duanqing remained relatively decent, leaving the Marquis's manor. He stood at the entrance and glanced across the street. The stone lion in front of Dingguo Marquis's manor still bore the gash that woman had chopped into it with her blade. Getting into the sedan chair, he closed my eyes. Liu Wei married a fallen official's daughter of noble birth as his second wife. Zhou Hu took the left chancellor's adopted daughter as a concubine. Old Zhao sent his wife who shared his hardships back to their hometown, then turned around and married a woman from the imperial clan. When drinking, they said that yellow gen-faced hag would be embarrassing to bring out. Linlin said, "Getting promoted and rich, then abandoning your original wife. That is our fate." I opened my eyes, looking at the swaying sedan curtain. Lately, the way Duanqing looks at me has also started to change before. He looked at me as a companion who shared hardships. No, he looks at me like an old piece of clothing. Not torn, still wearable, but no longer bright enough. He wants to wear something new. He doesn't realize those noble ladies look at him like looking at a piece of fat meat. He thinks that is what he deserves. Now that he has achieved success and fame, he should enjoy it. As for me, just a rock blocking the way, he talked about taking a concubine as if he was just notifying me to add an extra bowl and chopsticks. While my thoughts raced, a smile had already spread across my face. Dalang has worked hard for half a lifetime. You should enjoy yourself now. He froze. I walked closer to him, looking at the newly added wrinkles at the corners of his eyes, my voice trembling. You joined the army at 20, fought over 100 battles in 20 years, were enfoffed as a duke, and granted a noble title. Never mind some marquis family's legitimate daughter. Even a royal princess would be a suitable match. He opened his mouth. Those words "you're not allowed to make a fusses" stuck in his throat, and after a long while he choked out, "Wife, are you agreeing to this?" Why wouldn't I agree? I smiled gently. Dalang has achieved success and fame. I'm respected at home. Who do I rely on for that? Isn't it all earned by Dalang with your life? His eyes reddened. The year I married him, he was a downed nobody. I was a country girl. When he went on campaign, I sewed winter clothes. When he was injured, I brewed herbal medicine. His mother was bedridden for 3 years. I handled her chamber pot and urine without letting him worry for a single day. Husband. He gripped my hand, his rough palm burning hot, rest assured, even if I marry 100 noble ladies. You are still the main wife. No one can surpass you. I withdrew my hand and straightened his collar for him. As long as you recognize my worth, that is enough. I do. I absolutely do. Then I'd like to ask for some reassurance from you, too. I stepped back. Our eldest son is 19 now. He has been training with you in the military camp for 3 years. I'd like to request that he be granted the title of Crown Prince. I'll submit the petition tomorrow. There is one more thing. I took out a medicine packet from my sleeve and poured it into the tea. Please drink this bowl of medicine. He froze. Sterilization decoction. He violently knocked it away. Are you crazy? Don't panic. I gently stirred the tea and blew on it. Hear me out first. He glared at me, veins throbbing on his forehead. Jo is 20 Jan 3 this year, formerly the legitimate daughter of a marquis household, raised in luxury and privilege. I looked at him calmly. What would someone like that gain from marrying you as a concubine? Is it your age, your rough temper? His lips moved slightly. What she wants is your title, your power. I placed the tea in his hands, but the Jo family miscalculated. Your title, Juan Qing, was earned with your life. You decide who inherits it. You drink this bowl of medicine, and after Jo Jianxi enters the household, if she can't bear children, she won't have any crooked thoughts. I looked at him. When she finds out she can't have kids and makes a fuss, you just push it all on me. Say it was me, the jealous wife, who did it. You'll be squeaky clean. It'll all be my fault. He held the teacup, the tea rippling slightly. But think about it from another angle. I lowered my voice. If Jo Jianxi enters the household and gives birth to a son with her first child, won't she think, why can't my son inherit the title? She is a precious daughter of a noble family becoming your concubine. Why should her son rank below Chengji? His Adam's apple bobbed. When she makes a scene then, and her family joins in, the censors will impeach you for favoring your concubine over your wife, and the emperor will scold you for not even managing your household affairs properly. I sighed. You've fought battles your whole life. Do you really want to spend your old age scheming with women? The wind blew in from outside the window, and the candle flame flickered. Our sons, Changye pursues the military path, Changping the civil service. They're both at critical stages right now. We can't let something like this affect the children's futures. His murky eyes cleared up quite a bit. Heaven has been kind to me, giving me 2 smart sons. The children are not only my protective talisman, but also one of Juan Qing's few weaknesses. He suddenly spoke. I'll drink it. Staring at the foam in the tea, he closed his eyes and downed it in one gulp. After drinking, he slammed down the teacup with a bang. You're right. I've fought battles my whole life, so why should I, in my old age, still let women scheme against me? They want their grandsons to inherit the title. Dream on! I smiled and held his rough hands again. That is right. Our 3 children have followed you through campaigns east and west, suffering all kinds of hardships. This duke title should naturally be enjoyed by our sons. He nodded, clasped my hand in return, and patted it gently. My wife is still the most thoughtful. I will never be like those others who favor concubines and destroy their wives. Wife, trust me. I nodded vigorously, tears of emotion glistening in my eyes. I've always known that Dalang is not an ungrateful person like Lu Cheng. Lu Cheng, that brute who came from a bricklayer background, how much suffering did Linlin endure following him? After he achieved success and fame, he brought home a concubine, the daughter of a fallen official. In less than half a year, he tormented Linlin until she was neither human nor ghost. The day after I left the Zhending Marquis Manor, news came that Linlin had died of illness, and that ungrateful bastard Lu Cheng turned around and married a noble lady as his wife. He held a grand banquet for guests, full of pride and vigor. The original wife's children hadn't even emerged from the grief of losing their mother before being forced to kneel before the new madam and kowtow. That kind woman, who accompanied the man through half a lifetime of hardship, ended up with such a fate in the end. I suppressed the towering hatred in my heart and looked at Duan Qing with tears and a smile. This face, ravaged by wind, frost blades, and swords for 20 years, was withered, rough, dark, with an ugly scar on the left cheek. His eyes were no longer clear and bright, leaving only turbid desire. The way he looked at me changed from the focused gaze of the past to carelessness, often with a flash of disgust, but I still gazed at him tenderly, whispering hypnotically. My Dalang has never let me down. After more than 20 years as husband and wife, I understood Du and Ching too well. A crude man who climbed up from the bottom, then even after becoming a duke, he still loved being praised. But those civil officials in court from generations of scholarly families never looked at him properly. Vulgar mudlig was the open contemptuous term the civil official clique used for the nouveau riche nobles, but it didn't stop these self-proclaimed upright remnants of the previous dynasty from sending them concubines and adopted daughters, and these people, while cursing them as sour pedantic scholars, happily accepted and enjoyed them. Duanqing was no exception. The difference was that compared to those filial sons and worthy grandsons, he at least had some self-gen awareness and would listen to advice somewhat. Seeing the rare tenderness surfacing in his eyes, I decided to strike while the iron was hot. When will Miss Zhou enter the household? How about letting her in after Chang'e is granted the title of heir apparent? I looked at him with a smile, me face full of understanding. Sometimes I really envy her, enjoying a life of luxury as soon as she enters the door. But I accompanied Dalang through half a lifetime of hardship before earning today's status. I lowered my eyes, showing him my rough hands, my eyes instantly reddening. These hands had served his bedridden mother, dug him out from a pile of corpses when he was barely alive, tailored clothes for him, bandaged his wounds, washed his dirty laundry, and even held knives and wielded axes. But comparing yourself to others will only make you angry. Who told me to be born more than 10 years before her? Duanqing silently held my hand. After a long while, he dropped the line. I'll go write the petition for your title right now, and strode away. I watched him leave, me gaze falling on the empty doorway. 18 years ago when he went off to war, he stood at the village entrance to see him off. He looked back every 3 steps. Back then, his eyes were full of only me. Now, all that remained in his eyes was disgust. He couldn't even bother to hide. He joined the army at 20, fought his way until 40, and finally crawled out of the mud to become someone above others. But in his bones, he was still that cowherd boy ordered around by landlords. The moment he got a noble lady, he eagerly clung to her. This kind of man can only share hardship, not wealth and prosperity. Go fetch the account books, I said to my son who came over. Starting tomorrow, you'll learn to manage the family's properties. Chengyi was startled. Father won't agree to this. He will give them to us. I interrupted him. He drank that bowl of medicine, and that bit of guilt in his heart hasn't dissipated yet. Take advantage of this opportunity to grab control of the family assets. And from now on, he can take in as many noble ladies as he wants. Let him do as he pleases. Can't have kids anyway, so there won't be any trouble. Even if there is trouble, I'm not afraid. Men aren't afraid of being labelled ungrateful, so why should we women fear a mere reputation as a jealous wife? I placed my hand on that court robe embroidered with golden pythons, stroking it inch by inch. The stitches are still the same stitches from back then, but the person is no longer the person from back then. But I'm still the same me from back then. 30 Gen 8 years old, body strong and healthy, eldest son reliable, second son good at studies, little daughter well, Jan behaved. From now on, I'm going to live for myself. When Lady Zhou entered the household, me eldest son Chengyi had just been granted the title of heir apparent. She knelt to serve tea, but her eyes stabbed over like knives. I held the teacup without accepting it. Concubine Zhou seems unconvinced. She's startled, tears immediately welling up. Madam has misunderstood. This concubine is overjoyed to serve the Duke. A beauty shedding tears like a pear blossom in the rain. Duanqing immediately shot me a glare. I smiled. Is it because the heir apparent was granted his title too early, so you're unhappy? Lady Zhou cried even more pitifully, her face full of disbelief. Madam has wronged this concubine. Madam's eldest son being granted the title of heir apparent. How could this concubine be unhappy? She bit her lip stubbornly, holding back tears, as if I were the wicked woman bullying others with my power. Duanqing immediately spoke up. Madam know when to stop. I took a deep breath and put that perfect smile back on my face. All right, I was just teasing you earlier. Concubine Zhou, I stared at her. My Duke is 40 Gen 3 this year and a complete bory. You're a noble young lady in the prime of your youth at 18. Why would you willingly become a concubine to the Duke? Is it because you truly admire my Duke, or are you after the wealth and status of the Duke's mansion? As expected, Lady Jo naturally answered admiration. I let out a soft breath and looked at Juan-Qing with a smile. Although this guy is a complete bore, he does have at least some self-gen awareness. His previous urgent desire for Lady Jo seemed to have faded somewhat. Having achieved my goal, I quit while I was ahead and deliberately rewarded her with a pair of cheap bracelets. Although Juan-Qing was wary of Lady Jo, it didn't stop him from thoroughly enjoying the tender embrace. And for a boor like him who'd suffered half his life, this kind of gentle care and thoughtfulness from a high-born noble lady was surely a bone-scraping steel blade. As expected, Juan-Qing soon fell deep into it. Not only did he make an exception to accompany Lady Jo back to her maiden home, he would grant her every request. He even made an exception to let her live in a separate courtyard, assigned her servants and maids, and provided a sedan chair for her outings. Her setup was no less impressive than mine as the Duke's wife. Watching the flowing stream of expenses from Lady Jo's courtyard, I remained composed. Not only did I not obstruct it, I even deliberately added many more things. After Jo secured her position, she indeed made an issue out of this cheap bracelet. Juan-Qing really came to give me trouble, questioning me, how could the dignified wife of the Duke give a concubine such a cheap bracelet? Aren't you afraid of being laughed at by outsiders? Upon hearing this, I sadly wiped away my tears. Dalang, have you forgotten? This pair of bracelets, back when you were a squad leader and received a reward, you specially bought them for me. All these years, I've kept them on me, never taking them off. Tomi, this pair of bracelets is more precious than any treasure. Auntie Jo doesn't understand the important meaning these bracelets have for me. I understand that. But how could Dalang forget? Juan-Qing's lips moved, but before he could speak, Jo's eyes reddened first. It is this concubine's fault. You and the Duke are husband and wife who've shared hardships together. Naturally, this concubine can never shake that. She lifted her face, looking at Juan-Qing with tearful eyes. But when the Duke followed His Majesty to conquer the realm, those must have been the darkest times that ordinary people wouldn't want to recall. Why must Madam keep bringing up the Duke's painful memories? Juan-Qing's expression changed. The way he looked at me shifted from guilt to disgust. Jo is right, he said with a stern face. You always bring up the past, don't you just want to make me feel guilty? From now on, don't mention those old matters again. I looked at him. 20 Gen 6 years as husband and wife. We've been through hell and high water together, and now I can't even mention it. I raised my hand and slapped Jo across the face. You dare lay a hand on me? Jo covered her face, eyes full of disbelief. Juan-Qing was also stunned. I sneered. Jo, when your Jo family fell on hard times, I actually felt sorry for you. Today I finally realize you deserved every bit of what you got. What do you mean, madam? Juan-Qing frowned. I looked at him. She says those days were dark and shouldn't be brought up again. But who was with you during those days? Me, I braved the mountain of blades with you. I waded through the sea of fire with you. Now that you've achieved success and fame, those days have become dark times. Sad memories as that shouldn't be mentioned. Juan-Qing's lips moved slightly. Then let me ask you. I pressed forward a step. What if His Majesty thinks the same way? His expression changed. His Majesty now rules the realm, looking at you old retainers from his days as a prince, illiterate, vulgar in behavior, constantly bringing up the days when you all suffered together. Does His Majesty also find it annoying? Does he also think those were dark years, sad memories that shouldn't be mentioned, while those old ministers from the previous court are refined and cultured, proper in their conduct, never speaking of such things? Day after day they accompany His Majesty, discussing poetry and painting, speaking in gentle tones. As time goes on, when His Majesty looks at you crude folk, won't he also feel that those days were too dark and shouldn't be brought up? Juan-Qing's expression became extremely ugly. Dalang. I looked into his eyes. You resent me for bringing up the past and making you feel guilty. But have you ever thought that Zhou Jianxi makes you despise the past not because she feels sorry for you, but because she wants to dig out your roots. What are your roots? They're your merit from following the dragon. They're 20 Gen 6 years of life Jan and Jan death struggles. Dig all that out, and what are you? Nothing but a crude and vulgar oaf. By then, who can discuss poetry and painting with the Emperor? The Zhou family. Who can amuse the Emperor? The Zhou family daughter. And you, Duan Qing. I pointed at Zhou Jianxi covering her face. What she hates isn't me. It is you mudligs. If you hadn't followed the Emperor in rebellion, she'd still be the legitimate daughter of a marquis household, high and mighty. But now she has to kneel and serve you. How could she accept that in her heart? She can't touch your title, so she goes after your mind, making you despise your wife who shared your hardships, making you forget your origins, making you drift apart from your old brothers. Once you've all become isolated and alone, her Zhou family will have returned. Zhou Jianxi suddenly raised her head. You're slandering me. Fei, I'm slandering you. I looked at her. Then swear it, swear there is not a trace of resentment in your heart. That when you serve him, you never thought why should I? Fei, she would naturally refute this, but I wouldn't give her the chance anymore. I gave her another slap. Zhou Jianxi's whole body flew out, covering her face, unable to get up for a long while. I knew my own strength. I was a countrywoman who'd fought through mountains of blades and seas of fire. And I had plenty of strength. Zhou Shi covered her struck face, half of it swollen high, tears streaming down like rain, looking helplessly at Duan Qing, my Lord Duke. This concubine is wronged. This concubine is truly wronged. Duan Qing looked at her, heart-ash and scrutiny battling across his face. I shook my numb hand and sneered coldly. Dalang back when His Majesty was surrounded at Waziepo. 300 of you fought to the death for 3 days and nights, and 40 Gen 7 survived. His Majesty said he would never forget your grace for the rest of his life. Duan Qing's eyes tightened, and now. I looked at him. Those sour scholars from the previous dynasty accompany His Majesty daily in composing poetry, speaking soft and gentle words. As time goes by, when His Majesty sees you rough folk again, won't he also think that those dark days shouldn't be mentioned any more? His expression changed. I walked closer to him step by step. If one day His Majesty also finds you old ministers an eyesore and wants to replace you with a batch of refined scholars instead, Dalang, would your heart not turn cold? His Adam's apple rolled. I pointed at Zhou Shi. Put yourself in my shoes. I've endured 26 years of hardship with you. We've pushed through mountains of blades and seas of fire together. And now, for the sake of someone like this, you want to dig up my roots and stab my heart. Dalang, how can you bear it? He stared at me blankly. After a long while, he suddenly raised his foot and kicked Zhou Shi to the ground. Get back to your courtyard. Without my word, you're not allowed to come out. Zhou Shi lay on the ground, looking at him in disbelief. That evening, Duan Qing brought the storehouse keys, land deeds, and the newly bestowed silks and gold and silver from the Emperor before me, one by one. Madam, from now on, all of these will be under your management. I nodded and accepted them. Dalang, if you want to take concubines, I'll let you. If you want to enjoy yourself, I'll let you. But there is one condition. I looked at him solemnly, my face completely serious. Don't touch my foundation. My foundation was built through 20 and 6 years of hardship. Whoever tries to dig it up, I'll fight them to the death. I said to him, I know I'm old and faded, coarse and vulgar, so naturally I won't compete with the new woman for favor out of jealousy. If you're not afraid of being ridiculed and scorned by the scholars of the realm, you're free to divorce me, this wife who shared your poverty, and marry the noble lady your heart desires. Duan Qing naturally made all sorts of assurances, but I understand. A man's promises made out of guilt can't be counted on. As for those hard times, Lady Zhou was right. They shouldn't be mentioned anymore because I'm just a coarse and vulgar wife who shared his poverty without a beautiful face, without a young and fresh appearance. I'm no longer worthy of reminiscing with him about those bitter days and sweet memories. Duan Qing had neglected Lady Zhou for a few days, but truly couldn't resist the longing in his heart. And when night fell and all was quiet, he went to Lady Zhou's courtyard again. The next day, when Lady Jo came to pay her respects to me, she was timid yet concealing provocation. I paid her no mind and beckoned, calling over two women even more charming and alluring than her. This is Lady Yang, this is Lady Huang. Watching Zhou Jianxi's slightly changing expression, a feeling of satisfaction burst forth in my chest. They're just like you, former noble ladies. Now their families have met with great misfortune, trampled into the mud. But the Duke has always been kind and hearted and takes pity on them being alone and helpless, so he brought them into the residence. From now on, you'll be sisters and you must get along well. The identities of Yang Jianxi and Huang Jianxi had been embellished by me. The two were indeed daughters of official families, but not noble ladies. Yang Jianxi was a concubine born daughter of an official family. Being a daughter, after raising her for a few years and really unable to afford it anymore, she was sold at a high price to a pleasure house. Huang Jianxi had an even more illustrious background, a royal clanwoman from the previous dynasty. After the fall of the nation and destruction of her family, she could only end up in the marketplace. Both had grown up in pleasure houses and learned a whole set of people-pleasing skills. They could sing and dance, masters of various arts. Tell them to play delicate, and they'd instantly become pitiful and touching. Tell them to pretend to be noble ladies, and they'd instantly become dignified and reserved. Watching two even more outstanding competitors, Zhou Jianxi ground her teeth to pieces. Naturally, she had no time to cross swords with me. I began lavishly purchasing jewelry and accessories for myself, tailoring new clothes, acquiring mansions and estates. The more extravagant, the better. The century-old shop in the capital, Baibaoje, had newly released an inlaid 100 treasure kingfisher feather headdress, and I bought it without batting an eye. The maid serving beside me reminded me with a shocked expression, "Madam, take it easy." Ever since the three concubines entered the household, money's been flowing like water. If you keep spending like this, you'll be drinking the northwest wind next month. My tone was indifferent. Maid, you're wrong. If I don't spend this silver, there are plenty of people who'll spend it for me. I looked at her seriously. They've stolen my man. They're spending the silver that should belong to me and my children, and in the future they might even climb up the ranks and take my position. So why should I save any more? The maid was dumbfounded. She had suffered alongside me all the way, and had also witnessed the miserable days of those first wives. Lu Cheng's concubine Yun Jianxi confronted me directly at the Baibao Pavilion. We both had our eyes on the same red-gold kingfisher, Jan feather-adorned large phoenix hairpin. Who would have thought that Yun Jianxi, surrounded by attendants, dripping in gold and silver, and carrying herself with the air of a proper wife, was just a year ago a pitiful official's daughter whose family's men were all exiled, whose womenfolk became slaves and servants, kowtowing everywhere, begging to be taken in. She looked me up and down and said haughtily, "I'm buying this hairpiece. You should buy something else, madam." What responded to her was my massive solid slap, along with my condescending reprimand. "You, a mere concubine, dare to act so arrogant in front of this madam? You became a concubine to the defender duke, defeated the first wife, and thought you could rest easy, but in the end it was all for nothing. This is the retribution for your arrogance." I stared at her face, flushed red with anger, and slapped her again. "Feels pretty good being someone's concubine, huh? You've disgraced the face of all scholars under heaven. No wonder I look down on that bunch of Sojan called civil officials. On the surface they act all righteous, constantly spouting morality, righteousness, propriety, and honor. Today they say Lord so Dan and Dan so is crude. Tomorrow they say Marquis so Dan and Dan so is a nouveau riche. But then they turn around and send concubines to these people, even their own daughters. Then they incite their daughters to fight the legitimate wife scheme against the legitimate sons. Their ambition is as clear as day. Lady Yun's skills in household scheming were no less than Lady Zhou's, but unfortunately both her paternal and maternal clans had been convicted of crimes, so even if she defeated the legitimate wife, she could never be elevated to that position. That bastard Lu Cheng, after reaching the highest position among officials, also started caring about what the civil officials thought of him. He thought marrying a civil official's daughter would wash away the crudeness and nouveau-riche stench from his body. Little did he know, those literati who are refined to the bone, their disdain and contempt for military men is both a reasonable suppression and a survival wisdom. This Lady Yun's luck was truly good. The new mistress had just entered through the front door when she received the evaluation of being husband, Jan prospering from Master Yuan Tong of Huguo Temple. Lu Cheng, the most superstitious man in his life, believed it without doubt and elevated Lady Yun in every way, relying on the protective charm of being husband and prospering. Lady Yun was almost on equal footing with the new mistress, and now she is even showing off her authority in front of me. Could I tolerate her? Not only did I slap her twice, I also sowed discord between her and the new lady of the Zhengguo Marquis household. That husband and blessing trick of yours might fool a confused man like Lu Cheng, but thinking you can deceive the new madam, that is naive. Lady Yun's revenge came that very night. The pacification Marquis Lu Cheng came barging in furiously. I was in the middle of taking inventory of my newly acquired jewelry. "Li woman, get your ass out here." He was like a wild boar charging into a pen, his hulking flesh quivering all over in front of the Duke's household servants. He pointed at me from afar. "What the hell are you? How dare you slap my beloved concubine in public? I wouldn't even bear to touch a single finger of hers." Juan Qing rushed out from the study and grabbed him. Old Lu, calm down, calm down. Calm down my ass." Lu Cheng shoved him aside and pointed at me. "You country bumpkin. If I don't teach you a lesson today, my surname isn't Lu." Duan Qing moved closer again. "Old Lu, you know my wife is crude and fierce. For the sake of our brotherhood, spare her this time. Spare her." Lu Cheng's eyes bulged. "Duan Qing, are you even a man? Your woman runs wild outside, and you can't control her. I'll do it for you." He raised his hand. Duan Qing blocked in front of me, forcing a smile. All right, I'll deal with her later." Lu Cheng stared at him, then suddenly laughed. That laugh sounded even worse than cursing. "Duan Qing, oh Duan Qing." He patted Duan Qing's face. "Back when we fought side by side, you weren't like this. What happened? After being made a duke, did your guts get sealed away too?" Duan Qing's face flushed purple like pig liver. Lu Cheng walked around him and came in front of me, looking me up and down. "This is it. At your age still wearing such gaudy jewelry. Why don't you look in a mirror? Do you even deserve it?" He turned back to Duan Qing and said, "If you ask me, you should just divorce this old woman. I'll introduce you to some real noble ladies from prestigious families. Young ones, fresh ones, who won't embarrass you when you take them out." Duan Qing kept his head down and said nothing. "What can't bear to part with her?" Lu Cheng sneered. "A country bumpkin woman, and you actually treasure her. All us old brothers, who hasn't changed wives a few times. Only you're still clinging to this old hag. Isn't it pathetic?" Duan Qing lifted his eyelids and glanced at me. That one glance, I understood. It wasn't protectiveness. He was disgusted that I embarrassed him. All right. Lu Cheng turned back around and pointed at me. "Today's matter, for old Duan's sake. I won't do it myself. Old Duan, you do it yourself." Duan Qing stood to the side. His lips moved, but no sound came out. Lu Cheng's face was full of menace. "Old Duan, you know my temper." I was both afraid and resentful. What I feared was Lu Cheng. He really was a mad dog, whoever provoked him. He'd definitely bite back. Before, toward his comrades' wives and concubines, he still had some humanity. Now, having reached the pinnacle of power, his true nature is fully exposed. What chills me even more is Duan Qing. To appease Lu Cheng's anger, he actually slapped me in public. My whole body flew out. My forehead hit the pillar, and I saw stars. "You good gen for gen nothing wastrel. How dare you lay a hand on someone from the Lu family? Today's little lesson should teach you some sense." I endured the dizziness and held onto the pillar to get up. He raised his hand again. "Father." Cheng Yi rushed in and dropped to his knees before Duan Qing, clutching his legs tightly. "Father, show mercy." "Thy mother was at fault." I stopped Cheng Yi, not letting him continue. Then, with half my face swollen, I knelt straight down before Lu Cheng. Lord Zhongguo, it was this concubine's fault. This concubine will never dare again. Please forgive me for Linlin's sake, mother. Changyi's eyes showed immense pain, his face filled with shock and deep shame. I shook my head slightly at him. Lu Cheng is a mad dog, and, moreover, a ruthless person. A fierce general who survived the battlefield has nothing left to fear. Even though he wears human skin, the savagery in his bones won't disappear with promotions and honors. He will only get worse. Linlin, that poor woman who was tortured to death by Lu Cheng. Before I left, she held my hand and said 4 words to me: stay alive. The coarse flesh on Lu Cheng's face twitched. The 2 words Linlin pierced like a thorn into his heart that had long since rotted through fine. Lu Cheng spat and said, "For the sake of my nephew's commendable filial piety, I'll spare your mother this time." He looked at me, word by word. "Among us old brothers, most have changed wives or taken concubines. Only you're lucky enough to have met the soft, Dan-hearted old Duan, yet you still don't cherish your blessings. Simply ungrateful." After speaking, he swaggered off with Lady Yun. Duan Qing walked over, reaching out to help me up. I dodged away. He froze, then flew into a rage from embarrassment. "What are you dodging for? Isn't today's mess all caused by you? Why did you have to provoke Lady Yun for no reason? She is publicly recognized as having a husband and blessing fate. Lu Cheng is so superstitious. How could he not treasure her?" I raised my head and looked at him. "You're a dignified duke, yet you let a mere marquise climb all over you. To appease his anger, you hit your own legitimate wife. Is that so glorious?" I grew angrier as I spoke. "He clearly doesn't put you in his eyes at all." He felt a bit guilty, but quickly became self-righteous again. "Lu Cheng is just a mad dog. It is not like you don't know that. When I hit you, I still held back. If he didn't calm down, who knows what kind of trouble he'd stir up." "Enough, enough." He waved his hand irritably. "Go back to your room and stay there. Stop embarrassing me." After speaking, he turned and left. His retreating figure showed not a hint of hesitation. Chengji got up and helped me to my feet. "Mother." I held his hand without saying a word. I stood up straight. I wiped the blood stain from the corner of my lips. Gripping Chengji's hand, I said word by word, "Chengji, you want Lu Cheng to fall. Let him be disgraced and ruined, plummeting from heaven into the abyss." A flash of determination crossed Chengji's face as well. "I've wanted Lu Cheng to fall for more than just a day or two. The day Linlin breathed her last, I held her hand that was nothing but bones. She first told me to live well, then said 2 final words: take revenge. Today, that slap from Jun Qing was the last straw. I know that wanting Lu Cheng to fall from power won't be easy, but where there is a will, there is a way. I called Chengyi and Changping over, and we discussed for several days and nights. That mad dog Lu Cheng, having suddenly risen to prominence. All his flaws have come out. Treating human lives like grass, bullying men and women, favoring concubines while destroying his wife. Inside and outside the court, criticisms pile up like mountains. The civil officials have long been dissatisfied. The emperor, burdened by these men's merit from following him to power, doesn't dare earn the infamy of discarding the bow once the birds are gone, and can only raise his hand high but bring it down gently. But what if we add the strength of the civil officials? The eldest son Chengji is responsible for finding people to contact Linlin's 2 children. They live in fear under Lu Cheng's very nose, needing only a spark. The second son, Chengping, using his identity as a scholar from the academy, specifically picks places where censors appear to loudly cry out against injustice. Those censors, always impeaching my father for being crude day and night. What they should really be impeaching is the Marquis of Zhongguo for favoring his concubine and destroying his wife, forcing his first wife to death. But they suddenly go mute. The scholars chimed in and made a ruckus. The censors' faces all turned green. I then entered the palace to request an audience with the Empress. The Empress also suffered her way through hardship. She accompanied the Emperor from bouncing on horseback to sitting on the dragon throne. Now watching those pregnant favoured consorts in the 3 palaces and 6 courts, Her suffering is no less than ours. If not more, I knelt before her, crying like a child, crying about how Linlin died, crying about how those original wives and old people are all gone now. Those who died of illness, those sent back to their hometowns, those who disappeared without explanation. The children they left behind should have been enjoying the privileges their parents brought them in gold and jade, but now they're being neglected and trampled upon. The Empress's eyes reddened. Back in those days at the military camp, Linlin had helped her carry grain and supplies and boil herbal medicine. She hadn't forgotten those days. "What do you want to do?" she asked. "I want Lu Cheng stripped of his title and honors for the crime of favoring his concubine and destroying his wife." The Empress shook her head. "This charge won't stick to him. His merit from following the dragon is real and solid. His Majesty already feels guilty for suppressing his title, and the indulgence over these years has all been compensation." I raised my head. "Your Majesty, have you ever thought about why those civil officials are desperately trying to send their daughters into military generals' households?" She froze. "On the surface it is marrying off a daughter as a concubine. But what about behind the scenes?" I lowered my voice. "After Lu Cheng took the minister's daughter as concubine, how many fewer impeachment memorials were there against him? Those who didn't take concubines get impeached every few days. Why did my family's Dun Ching take in Lady Zhou? Wasn't it because he was scared of being impeached?" The Empress's expression changed. "What is the foundation of military generals? It is their merit in following the dragon. It is 20 and some years of risking their lives in battle. It is their military command. The civil officials want to dig up this foundation and replace it with their own people, their own bloodlines. Once all these military generals become sons, dan in dan law, and concubines and fathers to civil officials, who will they listen to?" "Your Majesty." I stared into her eyes. "But what if one day the hearts of all these military generals are no longer with the Emperor? Or rather, when all these military generals are gone and the newly appointed dukes, marquises, and counts are all the bloodlines of these civil officials?" The Empress's expression changed dramatically. After a long while, she spoke. "What do you want me to do? When there are enough impeachment memorials, please personally submit a memorial yourself, Your Majesty." "Me? You are the Empress, the original wife who suffered through hardships with the Emperor. If you speak up for Lu Cheng's original wife, you're speaking up for all the suffering original wives in the world. When the Emperor hears it, the one feeling ashamed won't just be Lu Cheng, but himself as well." She looked at me, a gleam flashing in her eyes. I didn't continue. Some things are best left unsaid. Those favored concubines in the rear palace should have someone knock some sense into them too. The Empress should also get this off her chest. Once Lu Cheng falls, those ungrateful men will have to sleep with one eye open. Half a month later, the censors were provoked by Changping into submitting memorials. They impeached Lu Cheng for favoring his concubine over his wife, driving his first wife to death, letting his servants run amok, and seizing people's land. Lu Cheng sent his household guards to corner those censors in an alley and teach them a lesson. This time, all hell broke loose. The stubborn censors wrote memorials overnight, listing dozens of grave charges in great detail, condemning Lu Cheng from head to toe. Immediately after, the sound of drums at Shuntian Prefecture shook the heavens. Lu Cheng's two sons knelt before the court, accusing their biological father of conspiring with his favored concubine to persecute their legitimate mother. Witnesses and physical evidence were all present. Lu Cheng was ordered to stay home and reflect on his mistakes. Yet he remained completely unconcerned. The law doesn't punish the masses. Half his colleagues were taking concubines and marrying second wives. So why single him out for punishment? Besides, the Emperor owed him a debt. So his title was secure. He didn't know that public opinion had already exploded. Scholars at the academies gathered daily at tea houses to curse him. Street urchins made up nursery rhymes about him. Storytellers turned Lady Lu's story into segments, and when they reached the emotional parts, the entire hall would be in tears. On the day Lu Cheng was impeached, Duan Qing locked himself in his study to write a memorial through the door. I heard him cursing all afternoon. Those sour scholars just can't stand to see us military men succeed. Back when we were conquering the empire, we had our heads tucked in our belts, while they hid in the rear composing poetry. Now, after enjoying a few days of peace, they're jealous. In the evening, he called Chengping in, and his scolding was thunderous. Your Uncle Lu even held you and let you ride a horse when you were little. You ungrateful bastard. Chengping stiffened his neck. He came to our door and forced you to beat my mother. The humiliation of one's mother is an irreconcilable grudge. Chengyi stood to the side, his gaze colder than icicles in the 12th lunar month. As a husband, father didn't stand up for my mother, but instead beat his legitimate wife for an outsider. How noble is such behavior? Duan Qing was left speechless. His face turned the color of liver, and after holding it in for a long while, he slammed his palm on the table. You don't understand shit. Lu Cheng is a mad dog who seeks revenge for the smallest slight. If I hadn't beaten your mother then, how could I have quelled his anger? He breathed heavily, as if trying to convince himself, or perhaps his son. Chengping, you don't know how vicious Lu Cheng is. Right now he is trapped in the residence and can't get out. But if he finds out you were the one organizing everything behind the scenes, will he let you off? I pushed the door open and went in. If he really does come to our door, we'll just say that you, as the head of the family, ordered them to do it. Duanqing pointed at me, his face red with anger. I ignored him and slapped a manuscript on the table. So, to prevent Lu Cheng from seeking revenge afterwards, I suggest the Duke immediately submit a memorial denouncing Lu Cheng for harboring resentment and having treasonous intentions all along. As for witnesses, the deathbed words of the former Lady Lu will that suffice. Duanqing looked down at the manuscript, his eyes nearly popping out. You're going to completely destroy old Lu, I sneered coldly, my whole body emanating a murderous aura. From the day he forced Linlin to her death, I've wanted his life. He came to my door to humiliate me over some favored concubine. Every single moment I've been thinking about how to make him pay. You, Duanqing pointed at me, looking at me like a stranger. When did you become so vengeful over every slight? I smiled faintly. Haven't you changed too? After being Enfafofta's duke, you've become arrogant, ordering people around, embracing women left and right. Now that I'm at least the duke's wife, naturally, I should also be high and mighty, disown all relatives, and enforceth those who follow me prosper, those who oppose me perish. Duanqing opened his mouth. Lord Duke, hurry up and write. I stared at him. Lu Cheng must fall. First, to avenge him coming to your door, to humiliate your wife and children second, to salvage your dignity from being pointed at and cursed. Shame and anger flashed across his face. When the time comes, you'll announce publicly. Lu Cheng went too far, forcing me to beat my own wife and children over a favored concubine. What kind of scoundrel does such things? I only showed him much forbearance for the sake of our past comradeship. Third, I lowered my voice. Once Lu Cheng falls, Summoning will have to take over the military power in his hands. A bright gleam suddenly flashed in Duanqing's eyes. I handed him the brush, personally ground the ink, and watched him write with crooked strokes. When he wrote the last sentence in consideration of Lu Cheng's merit and accomplishments for all eternity, I beseech your majesty to overlook his flaws and prevent him from straying further down the wrong path. He paused his brush. The earlier part writes about him harboring resentment and complaining about unfair rewards. Yet the later part asks the emperor for leniency. Isn't this self-contradictory? Your grace, just write it. I pressed down on his hand. His majesty will make his own judgment. He looked at me with suspicion. Don't worry, I said. Not only must you write it, but we must let the world know why you wrote it. You did it to protect your wife, to seek justice for your legitimate spouse. Scholars value this above all. Chengyi chimed in from the side. Father Aunt's word spreads of your reputation for protecting your wife. The civil officials will think more highly of you. Shengping also nodded. Those fellow students at the academy most respect those who value relationships and loyalty. Duanqing's eyes darted around, and with feigned reluctance, he stamped it with his official seal and had someone send it out. The very night the memorial was submitted, It spread throughout the palace and beyond. It is said that the emperor personally handed it to several high ministers to read, sighing as they read. Duanqing, this rough man, is actually quite loyal and righteous. Lu Cheng has gone too far in bullying others, pushing even an honest man to desperation. Although Lu Cheng still wasn't punished, Duanqing's reputation did indeed turn around considerably. That day, Duanqing got thoroughly drunk, draping his arm over my shoulder, his tongue thick with alcohol. Wife. That day, I was wrong. I helped him onto the bed and had someone remove his boots. He quickly started snoring, drool running down the corner of his mouth, really unseemly. I stood before the bed looking at this face I'd slept beside for 26 years. On her deathbed, Linlin gripped my hand and said, "Revenge." She didn't say how I knew. Some knives require borrowing someone else's hand. Soon after, the Empress's memorial was submitted. It wasn't a simple impeachment, but a tearful plea starting from carrying grain sacks in the military camp back then, describing how virtuous Madame Lu was, how she endured hardship, how she was tormented to death, describing how first wives across the realm suffered, how ungrateful military officers broke hearts, what lay hidden behind the marriages between civil and military officials. The final line, each word written in blood and tears. This subject dares to ask your majesty to seek justice for all the suffering first wives under heaven. That night, the emperor went to the empress's palace. No one knew what they discussed. The next morning at court, the imperial edict came down. Marquis Zhengguo, Lu Chengfe, favoring his concubine over his wife, forcing and harming his first wife, is stripped of his title and credentials, demoted to commoner, never to be Rizan employed. The Yun woman exiled to the frontier, never to be pardoned. Other nobles who similarly favored concubines over wives and remarried noble ladies were also severely reprimanded. Not only were they fined 3 years' salary, they were forced to observe mourning for their first wives for 1 year. When the news reached the inner courtyard, I was facing the mirror, putting on that red gold kingfisher feather phoenix hairpin. Nanny was wiping tears beside me. "Madam, Lu Cheng has fallen." I hummed in acknowledgement, adjusting the phoenix hairpin. "Madam, why aren't you happy? What are you so happy about?" "Lu Cheng has fallen, Nanny," I said. "What do you think Duanqing is thinking right now?" She froze. Outside the window, the swirling snow had already blanketed the ground without anyone noticing. The emperor can use the charge of favoring concubines and destroying the wife to depose Lu Cheng today, and tomorrow he can use the same excuse to move against anyone. Duanqing took in Lady Zhou. What is the essential difference from Lu Cheng? It is just a matter of degree. Yue isn't asking Nanny what Duanqing is thinking. She is confirming that every thread of the net she personally wove is in place. Lu Cheng is the first domino to fall, and Duanqing has long been standing in the position of the second domino. He just doesn't know it yet. There is another point I must mention, the Empress. When Yue went to the Empress crying for justice, on the surface it was to seek fairness for Linlin. But in reality, she was reminding the Empress, "You are also the original wife. You are also being replaced by newcomers. Those favored concubines in the harem and the concubines these nobles take in are essentially the same thing. The Empress isn't standing up for Linlin, she is standing up for herself. Duanqing has been behaving himself these days to an unusual degree, with the wind of the Emperor cracking down on nobles growing stronger by the day. He comes to my room every day to report in, but doesn't even dare set foot in his concubine's door. I make him sleep on the Arhat bed in the outer room. He looks aggrieved. Madam never minded me before. I flipped through my book without even lifting my eyelids. Watching those earnest students, reserved and refined, graceful and handsome, articulate in conversation, composing verses effortlessly, I feel like my whole being has grown younger. He froze. And then looking at you before I finished speaking, his face had already flushed red. After a long pause, he asked hesitantly, "Madam, you can actually use so many idioms." I put down my book and lifted my chin. My father was at least a scholar. and our ancestors produced an imperial graduate. Just because I've been a rough man's wife for 26 years doesn't mean the heritage of a scholarly farming family is severed. He stood there with his mouth open, as if seeing me for the first time. All these years, I followed you through military campaigns north and south, bore and raised children, served your parents, and stabilized the home front. But I never once put down my books. Now that I'm the Duke's wife, I must keep up with the times even more. He suddenly grasped my hand. Suddenly realized that with this attire, you're no less elegant than those noble ladies of the previous dynasty. I pulled my hand back. Clothes make the person. I can't embarrass the Duke. He stared at me blankly, then suddenly called my given name. I didn't respond. He grasped my hand again. 30% aggrieved, 50% probing. I've noticed that Yue has been much colder to me lately. I pulled my hand back once more. That line should be mine to say. Since Lady Jo entered the household, the Duke's treatment of me is no longer what it once was. He looked at me, his eyes actually seeming a bit dazed. You used to call me Delang. When did things become so distant between us? I fell silent. After a long while, I looked up at him. People always change. I imitated the way those scholar-gen officials looked at commoners, only glancing at him from the corner of my eye. As a dignified duke, you should restrain your words and actions. From now on, no noise when eating, no sound when drinking tea, no picking your teeth in public. With each thing I said, his imposing manner diminished a bit. Stand with proper posture. He immediately straightened his slightly hunched back, but after a short while grew tired and sat down again. Sit with proper posture too. He hurriedly brought his legs together and straightened his back and shoulders. Less than the time it takes to drink a cup of tea later, he eagerly came over again. I lowered my head to flip through my book, not looking at him. The sunlight outside the window was just right. In the past, he would also eagerly come over like this, calling me Sister Yue, saying when he made it big he'd make me an officially titled lady. Now the official title is here, but I no longer want to respond to his. Yue Lucheng fell, the first founding minister to have his title stripped and Tren destroyed. The day the news spread, Juan Qing's study was packed with people. 30 Gen 6 founding nobles, dukes, marquises, and earls filled the room to capacity. Duke Fuguo Zhou was the first to speak. Old Duan the Emperor is about to kill the donkey once the grinding is done. What do we do? Duan Qing rubbed his hands together, unable to answer. I carried the teacup and walked in. I put down the teacup, my gaze sweeping across their faces one by one. The Emperor hasn't done anything yet, and you're all already panicking. No one responded. I sneered coldly. Back when you all despised your humble wives, did you ever think about how they felt? Zhou slapped the table. Old Dune, you're a grown man. Yet you let a woman boss us around like this? Dune Qing's lips moved. He glanced at me, then shrank back. I'm telling you, old Zhou. He squeezed out a sentence. You forced your sister Jan Law out just to marry a noble woman, and now you won't let people talk about it. The entire room fell silent for a moment. Someone chimed in, never mind forcing out your original wife. The child is still your own flesh and blood. As soon as the new wife entered the door, you sent the kid back to the old home. A half-gen grown boy of 15, sturdy as an ox, didn't last long after returning home. They say it was because he couldn't adapt to the climate. Who believes that? Zhou's eyes shifted evasively. That kid was spoiled by his mother. I couldn't control him. Old Zhou, I interrupted him. Have you been having back pain lately, feeling inadequate? He froze for a moment. How did you know? It is normal when you get old. I smiled. That is right, Birth. Old age sickness. And death. No one can escape. Fortunately, your new wife's belly is productive and bore you a legitimate son. When you're gone, that new wife of yours will be the youngest duchess in the Great Yan dynasty. And that son of yours will be the youngest duke in all of Great Yan. Johu's face turned pale. The entire room gasped in shock. These guys are more sensitive to the enemy's every move on the battlefield than anyone, but when it comes to these matters, they're just blind and deaf. But after all, they crawled out of mountains of corpses and seas of blood. With things said this far, what is there not to understand? Old Joe, you worked hard your whole life, only to end up making wedding clothes for others. This is what you get for abandoning the old for the new. Johu's face turned green, then white, white then green. I picked up my teacup and looked at the others nearby. Marquise Liu's second wife came through the door 3 years ago. Off the 2 children your first wife left behind. Doan drowned, Doan died falling from a horse. You say it was an accident. Liu Wei shot up to his feet. Haven't you been having lower back pain lately? Jetting up frequently at night, lacking energy, sometimes you can't even draw your bow. He froze. If I remember correctly, that second wife of yours is the young lady from the former Hanlin's family. A distant relative of hers is a female physician in medical circles. She makes her rounds specifically in the inner quarters of various households. Liu Wei's face turned white bit by bit. I looked at the next one, Marquis Zhao. Enar. Zhao Danyu waved his hands, his expression more miserable than crying. Sister Jen in Jen Law say no more. I'll investigate as soon as I get back. As soon as I get back. I put down my teacup and got up to leave. At the doorway, I looked back. A whole room full of grown men in fine brocade clothes, every one of them pale as dirt. On their faces there was finally a trace of belated fear. Not much, but enough to make them paranoid for a while. 30 Gen 6 men, their first wives. I knew them all. Aside from those who died young, the ladies with imperial honors who are still alive can be counted on one hand, shocking to the eyes. I returned to the main courtyard and had the nanny prepare a bowl of health tonic soup. Junqing followed me in, moving chairs one moment and adjusting stools the next. Making small talk, I ignored him and drank the soup the maid brought over. What are you drinking? He leaned over. Health tonic soup. You're only 30 Gen 8. What health do you need to nurture? I put down the empty bowl and looked up at him. Back when I followed you through all those military campaigns, I developed many health problems. I really should take good care of myself now. Otherwise, if something happens to me, there will be other women who enjoy the fruits of my labor, spend my money, and bully my children. Duanqing gave an awkward laugh. My lady, you're overthinking. Duanqing, am not the kind of person who abandons his wife who shared his hardships, even if I go. I stared at him. I will never let those people step on me and reap the benefits. I will live to 90 Gen 9 and outlive you ungrateful people. My lady, I haven't favored concubines over my wife. Under my gaze, his voice grew smaller and smaller, and his eyes began to avoid mine. Suddenly, he slapped himself hard across the face. It is my fault. I'm not human. I'll go kick Joe and the others out of the manor right away. Come back. I called him back, stood up, and personally straightened his collar. Am I the kind of jealous person who can't tolerate others? You've worked hard your whole life. What is wrong with enjoying a few women? That is their good fortune too. He froze. But one thing, I grabbed his collar and tightened it slightly. The authority over household management, family property, and the Duke's title must be left to my children. That is only natural. I'm not a fool like old Joe, working hard my whole life only to make wedding clothes for others in the end. I let go and sat back down. When a second wife enters the door, she'll inevitably have ambitions. The Duke's title is a juicy piece of meat. Who wouldn't want a bite? She'll eliminate rivals, go after the first wife's children, and then replace them. Zhou Hulu Wei, weren't they all like this? Duanqing's Adam's apple bobbed. I'm asking you, Duke, are you afraid or not? He nodded heavily, a flash of cold light passing through his eyes. Suddenly he embraced me tightly. My lady is still the formidable one. You saw through those women's schemes at a glance. I found it uncomfortable and pushed him away. He suddenly asked, Has Lady Jo been behaving herself with you lately? I gave an ambiguous smile. She is a legitimate daughter of the former Marquis's household. After falling on hard times, she can only be a concubine to a rough brute like you who barely knows a few characters. Do you really think she is truly content with this? The flesh on his face twitched. She shouldn't go that far, right? She has been pretty well damn behaved recently. I smiled and said nothing more. A blade hangs above the character for lust. When our ancestors created this character, they probably foresaw this long ago. After Lu Cheng was demoted to commoner status, I knew he would come. I just didn't expect him to come this quickly. The sound of blades hacking at the manor gates could be heard even through 3 courtyards. Duan Qing rushed out from the study, his face deathly pale. Look at the mess you've made. Now old Lu's come to our doorstep with his blade. I set down my teacup. How many men did he bring? 100 or so, all his former personal guards. That is enough. I stood up and headed outside. Duan Qing grabbed me. Where are you going? To rally the troops. Have you lost your mind? His eyes widened. That is Lu Cheng. You dare fight him in the streets. I shook off his hand and looked back at him. If you don't kill the snake, it'll come back to haunt you. I was just looking for him. And now he has delivered himself to my doorstep. But you can't do it in broad daylight. That is why. I cut him off. This is all my doing alone. It has nothing to do with the Duke, he froze. From now on, you pretend to be sick. I'll handle everything in the Duke's manor. You know nothing about what happens outside. If anyone asks, push it all onto me. He opened his mouth. Go quickly. I straightened his collar, smiling gently. Have Zhou Jianxi attend to you well. Best to make it convincing. Don't let anyone catch on. He stared at me for a long moment, then suddenly let out a breath of relief. Then you, be careful. Watching him scurry toward the back courtyard, I smiled. This man, his whole life is like this. When he encounters anything other than war, especially interpersonal troubles, he loves to play the coward and hide behind me. In the past, I was angry at his failure to meet expectations. Now I only feel fortunate, without him getting in the way. The 500 Fu troops follow my commands perfectly. The moment the main gate swung open, Lu Cheng was still swinging his blade at the door. Duan Qing, come out here. You ungrateful bastard. His cursing came to an abrupt halt, because he saw me, saw the mass of armored Fu troops behind me. Commoner Lu Cheng, armed siege of the Duke's residence, insubordination against superiors, by law punishable by death. I raised my hand and gave the order. Whoever captures this man will be rewarded with 1,000 taels of silver. Under such a generous reward, that group of Fu troops instantly surged with morale. Lu Cheng's 100 or so personal guards were subdued to the ground in less than half a tea's time. Only he remained alone, covered in wounds, stubbornly swinging his blade, fighting while retreating, retreating while cursing. Duan Qing, you cowardly turtle. I saved your life back then, and you send a woman out to deal with me. No one paid him any attention. After the time it takes to burn an incense stick, he was half-dead, kneeling on the ground, wounded in multiple places, unable to hold on any longer. I walked up to him. He raised his head, staring at me with eyes full of resentment and venom. Where is Duan Qing? He has the guts to go against me, but not the guts to come out. Lu Cheng. I looked down at him from above. That day when you drove Linlin to her death, did you ever think this day would come? His pupils contracted sharply. It is you, you vicious woman. Linlin broke ties with her family for you, followed you through hell and high water. You achieved success and fame. She didn't enjoy a bit of fortune, tormented by you until death. At her funeral, I asked you to treat the 2 children. Well, what did you answer? He gritted his teeth, cursing obscenities from his mouth. I looked down from above. Doesn't the Yun family bring you prosperity? How come it is not working anymore? A trace of regret flashed in his eyes, immediately drowned by venomous hatred. When the people from the 5 cities military commissioner arrived, Lu Cheng had already been tied up tightly. The leader was startled when he saw Lu Cheng covered in wounds, but he was exceptionally polite to me. Nowadays, Who in the capital doesn't know that the Duke of Wrong's mansion is practically run by the lady? Without a word, they took Lu Cheng away. The emperor is indeed merciful. Although Lu Cheng was stripped of his title, he was after all an old retainer from the prince's residence. The emperor pardoned him and had the imperial physicians treat him. I'm not in a hurry. Upon returning to the mansion, I first sent someone to the Imperial Medical Bureau with a card, requesting the best internal medicine expert to come treat Juan Qing's illness. Then, carrying a bowl of medicine, I entered the bedroom. Lady Zhou was keeping watch by the bedside. Seeing me arrive, she obediently stepped out. I handed the medicine to Juan Qing. It is for calming the nerves. Drink it and lie down properly. When the imperial physician comes in a bit, don't let anything slip. Without a word, he drank it. For over 20 years, I've been the one making decisions on all household matters. Big and small, he has long gotten used to it. The medicine kicked in, and he quickly fell asleep. When the imperial physician arrived, Juan Qing was lying in bed, his face ashen, his breathing faint. I sat by the bedside wiping away tears. It is all caused by his old injuries. In his early years, following His Majesty to conquer the realm, going through hell and high water, he kept pushing through, relying on his youth. He could still get up this morning, but when that brute Lu Cheng came barging in, the Duke, being such a sentimental man, got so anxious and angry that he collapsed on the spot. The imperial physician took his pulse, nodded, and wrote a prescription. I rewarded him generously and personally saw him out. Then I changed my clothes and entered the palace to plead guilty. Kneeling before the emperor, I kowtowed so hard it made thumping sounds. Lu Cheng led people to storm the Duke's manor, causing the Duke's old ailment to flare up and collapse on the spot. In my panic and helplessness, in a moment of fury, I ordered this man to be subdued. I beg your majesty, for the sake of the Duke's service in risking life and limb for you, to punish only me alone. The emperor said nothing. I raised my head, face covered in tears. This man goes too far. Back then, for the sake of a favoured concubine, he came barging in, forcing the Duke to divorce me. I endured it, but he shouldn't have come barging in again when the Duke is gravely ill. Are we wives who shared hardship, only fit to suffer alongside our husbands, but not worthy of enjoying the good times? If this can be tolerated, what cannot be? The emperor was moved. He personally helped me up and sighed. Old Duan has achieved what he has today. And you, his virtuous wife, deserve much of the credit. Lu Cheng has always been arrogant, and his disaster today is also his own doing. When leaving the palace, I carried the imperial gift of medicinal supplements in my arms, with an imperial physician assigned by the emperor following behind me. The news spread throughout the capital that very day. Visitors coming to see the patient were endless. Those founding officials, who used to give me a nod at most, now respectfully called me Sister Jenin Jen Law Younger Sister, greeting me first upon entering and thanking me before leaving. They had also gone to visit Lu Cheng and mentioned Lu Cheng's miserable condition to me in passing. Covered in wounds, although treated by the imperial physician, the situation still isn't good. I reckon his days won't be easy either. The wife he remarried has already left a divorce letter and returned to her parents' home with her dowry. His trusted aides have all left too. Only 2 children remain. It is truly pitiful. While speaking, they kept stealing glances at me. I laughed coldly without hesitation. Serves him right. This is what he gets for forcing old Duan to humiliate me back then. These people immediately fell silent, then loudly declared that Lu Cheng brought it upon himself and wasn't worthy of sympathy. I stood in the corridor, watching the people coming and going, and smiled. They said I was a woman who yielded to no man. They said I was devoted to protecting my husband, valuing loyalty and righteousness. They said Lu Cheng deserved it, brought it upon himself. Not a single person mentioned the envious looks on their faces when Lu Cheng married his new wife. But that is how it is. Who would remember anyway? In the past, they only remembered the vulgarity of their first wife and her repulsively aged appearance. But they never knew that if you push a first wife too far, she'll take lives too. Juan Qing's illness came on strangely. Imperial physicians were replaced batch after batch. Medicine was poured bowl after bowl. Yet his condition worsened day by day. The most anxious wasn't his band of sworn brothers, nor was it the emperor on the dragon throne. Much less me. It was Zhou Jianshai. She stayed by the bedside almost every step of the way, personally brewing medicine, personally feeding medicine. Her eyes cried red and swollen. Her whole person thinned a size. Each time I came and went, I'd only glance at her from the corner of my eye. The coldness in those eyes was enough to make her shiver for quite a while. More than once she collapsed crying before Duanqing's bed. "Duke, this concubine is afraid. The way Madame looks at me is so terrifying." Duanqing lay in bed. His body felt heavy, but his mind wasn't broken. He looked at Zhou Jianshi, then at me, suspicion gradually rising in his eyes. This illness of mine, is it... Before he could finish, I silently placed a ledger beside his pillow. The darling the Duke treasures at the tip of his heart. In the half-year since she entered the household, everything she has taken from the storehouse is all in here. He opened the first page and his expression changed immediately. Gold ornaments, jade objects, ancient artifacts from the previous dynasty, imperially bestowed tribute silk. 340 Dan1 items. Even an 8 Dan fold ledger couldn't contain them all. I handed him a second one. This is the silver she withdrew from the accounting office. At first it was 10 or 20 taels, then 100 taels, then 1,000 taels in half a year, 30 Gen 7,000 taels. I leaned down and said softly, 30 Gen 7,000 taels enough to maintain a private army. Duanqing's hands began to tremble. The things Zhou Jianshi moved out, an average of 2 items per day, truly worthy of being a legitimate daughter carefully cultivated by a marquis household of the former dynasty. Compared to her, Yun Jianshi is nothing. He suddenly spoke. "Simone, bring that woman to me." When Zhou Jianshi entered, there was no panic on her face. She knelt on the ground, suddenly covered her mouth, and began to retch. I smiled. "Is concubine Zhou with child?" She raised her eyes, shy and timid. "Madam has good eyes. These past few days. This concubine has been constantly vomiting. The old nanny said it might be pregnancy. I wanted to report to Madam but feared making Madam angry, so I could only endure it." Before she finished speaking, a teacup was violently thrown at her feet. "What scheming!" Duanqing sprang up from the bed, like an enraged trapped beast. "Drive her out of the manor. Drive her out immediately." Zhou Jianshi covered her face, looking at him in disbelief. Until her death, she never understood why the words "with child" brought not compassion, but expulsion from the household. She didn't understand. Those noble ladies from the former dynasty. Her sisters, none of them understood. This group of men who crawled out from mountains of corpses and seas of blood. What do they hate the most? Not stealing money, but stealing family. They moved things from their husband's family to their maiden family, thinking it was just ordinary household scheming. Little did they know that in these men's eyes, this was the same as enemy spies depleting provisions and cutting off supply lines. After Lady Zhou was expelled from the manor, Duanqing sent people to raid the Zhou family. They only recovered a small portion of the things. When the head guard Chen Suian returned to report, his face was livid. Following the Duke through life and death for 20 years, it has always been US raiding other people's homes. Never thought a woman would hollow out our foundation. After hearing this, Duanqing's last breath, sustained by rage, completely gave out. His whole body fell straight backward when he woke up again. He could no longer speak. The truth about his first wife and legitimate son was revealed. It really was the new wife's doing. That lowest gen level instigation I'd done back then was just me being unable to stand seeing him too comfortable deliberately making it up. But Zhou Hu took it as truth. After returning, he had people arrest and torture those around the new wife. Ordinary people under torture would confess without hesitation, even if asked whether they'd plucked the stars from the sky. Then the words became prophecy. The new wife really had been giving him slow, Dan-acting poison, just in mild doses. The young child born to the new wife knelt on the ground, crying and begging. "Father, please don't drive Mother away." This man who could hold a pass single-handedly on the battlefield broke down wailing on the spot. Liu Wei wasn't faring any better either. The original wife was frail and weak. The legitimate son was ruined in upbringing. The new wife didn't poison anyone. But there was solid evidence she was moving the Marquis Manor's assets to her maiden family. The younger son hugged his leg, calling Papa. He locked himself in the study for 3 days. And when he came out, half his hair had turned white. I said to Duan Qing, Zhou Hu and Liu Wei's original wives suffered endless hardships following their men back in the day, only to end up making wedding clothes for others. Pitiful are their children. The sick one's sick, the dead one's dead. The ones raised crooked, raised crooked. Duan Qing's murky eyeballs moved slightly. Lin Lin too. If her spirit exists in heaven, who knows how much regret she must feel. His lips trembled, as if wanting to say something. Why was Lu Cheng so easily stripped of his title? Favoring concubines and destroying his wife was just the pretext. What really killed him was his marriage alliance with the previous dynasty. I looked at him. The emperor rebelled because he was driven to desperation by those scholar Gen officials, finally managed to trample them down, and you lot rushed to make marriage alliances with them. How could the emperor not be wary? Fear and relief flashed across his face. Although the Zhou family wasn't core power of the previous dynasty, just ordinary nobles implicated by association. I paused. But do you know how my parents died? His eyes flew wide open. After that, his body began trembling violently, he remembered. The Zhou family's father, the previous dynasty's Marquis of Dingxi, back then bullied men and dominated women, driving my Yue family to destruction. And he brought the daughter of his wife's mortal enemy into the manor, and even forced his wife to treat her kindly. He looked at me, tears rolling down in big drops. His lips moved desperately, but only produced wheezing sounds. That hand reached out trembling, trying to grab onto something. I didn't take it, I just stood up and looked down at him. Rest easy, Duke. Your mission is complete. I've suffered with you for most of my life. It is time I enjoyed some peace. After you're gone, with no man above me to control me, no patriarchal authority pressing down on me, no one will call me a hag anymore, no one will ever despise me again. Just thinking about such days makes them seem wonderful. He stared wide, Jan-eyed, his cloudy pupils filled with disbelief. I've calculated it all. The Emperor will treat us orphans and widows well because of your untimely death. After all, a deceased hero puts the Emperor's mind more at ease than a living one. He opened his mouth. Trying to say something. I continued, ever since you were granted your title, I've been thinking of ways to let you live out your life with dignity. I thought of you wholeheartedly, yet you stabbed at my heart at every turn. Complex emotions, guilt, and regret flashed across his face, tears sliding from his eyes once more. I let out a light sigh, saying cheerfully, but this is good too, leaving early, leaving with dignity. I still have to thank you. I can finally enjoy my peaceful days without worry. I'm only 39 years old. The days ahead are still long. His body convulsed violently. Forgot to tell you, what you drank back then wasn't a sterilization tonic, but a slow-down-acting prescription. The dosage of that prescription wasn't large. It wouldn't take his life immediately. What really brought him down step by step was that bowl of medicine with an increased dosage later on. His eyes suddenly bulged wide, his face flashing with disbelief, regret, and resentment. I looked at him, a trace of sorrow floating to my lips. Back then, my little sister was tormented to death by the Zhou family, already 3 months pregnant. And Zhou Zhenxi, just an 8-year-old little girl at the time, watched my little sister wail in agony until she died. The light in his eyes extinguished inch by inch. He just painfully closed his eyes. 2 streams of tears silently sliding down from the corners. After a long while, he heavily exhaled a breath of foul air, slowly closed his eyes. I stood for a while, then turned to walk out. Reaching the doorway, I turned back for another look. His expression was actually peaceful, seemed like he'd come to terms with it. Just like when he said he was taking a concubine, I had worn this same expression. How long did she wait? From that bowl of medicine entering his mouth to the final bowl with increased dosage. How many days and nights passed in between? Every day she served tea and water, managed the household affairs, entertained guests, wearing the proper smile of a duke's wife on her face, yet knowing clearly in her heart this day would come sooner or later. She waited for Duanqing to take in the Zhou family, waited for Lu Cheng to fall, waited for the Empress to make her move, waited for the nobles to feel insecure, waited for Duanqing's illness to be confirmed, waited for all the chess pieces to fall into their proper positions. Then, and only then, did she make that final move. In the last moments of his life, Duanqing finally understood what Yue had felt back then, that feeling of being betrayed by your closest person, powerless to resist, forced to accept it. Duanqing's funeral was exceptionally grand. I left all funeral arrangements to my 2 sons. The emperor also gave Duanqing great face, issuing an edict at the funeral to appoint Chengji as the new Duke of Rongguo. The second son, Chengping, could still participate in the upcoming special imperial examination. The emperor's rewards to the Duan family were exceptionally generous. Everyone was saying the emperor truly favored Duanqing extraordinarily. Only I knew that as a founding minister who survived intact and whole, the best way to preserve one's final dignity before the emperor was to leave a step early. I'd racked my brains to preserve his dignity, but he insisted on colluding with those people. Then I could only fulfill his dignity for him, once and for all. I didn't go to the mourning hall, but visitors coming to see me were endless. They were all women I'd befriended over the years, original wives, second wives, and those like me who had endured when I appeared at the mourning hall. All the guests turned to look at me in unison. In their eyes there was respect, there was probing, and also a trace of barely concealed awe. I said to the guests, "Every old Duan is gone. As a widowed woman, it won't be proper for me to deal with you gentlemen anymore." Shifting the conversation, she looked at the wives beside these men. "However, the gates of the Duke Rongguo's mansion are always open to you ladies." No one spoke, but I knew they understood. In the past, when we gathered together, we could only cry. Cry about our husband's change of heart, cry about our bitter fate, cry about our pitiful children. From now on, when we gather together, we can do something else. For instance, make those ungrateful people lose sleep at night. For instance, let those high-down-born noble ladies who always like to pluck peaches know where a wife from humble origins keeps her knife. Outside the window, it had already grown dark. I was the first to walk out of the mourning hall. I was going to enjoy the beautiful second half of my life. I know many readers must have very complicated feelings at this point. Some will clap in satisfaction. Serves them right. Those ungrateful men deserve this ending. Some will feel sorry for Yue. She didn't have to become like this. It was this world that forced her. What I want to say is, this is a story, not a behavioral guide. Yue's choice is a product of that specific era and specific circumstances. There was no law to protect her, no system to support her, no one to speak up for her. Her only weapon was her own mind. And we readers today, after finishing this story, what we should really take away is not how to scheme against others, but the following points. First, always maintain independence. Economic independence, mental independence, personality independence. Don't build all your sense of security on any one person. If Yue didn't have management skills, hadn't read books, hadn't built connections, she wouldn't be able to do anything. Second, never give up your bottom line. You can compromise, you can make concessions, but you need to know where to stop retreating. Yue's bottom line is, don't touch my roots, children, property, dignity. What your bottom line is only, but you must have one, and you must defend it. Third, kindness needs the ability to be protected. Lin is kind, but her kindness has no protection whatsoever. So her kindness gets devoured by people, leaving not even bones behind. Kindness is good, but please equip your kindness with a suit of armor. Fourth, knowing people is more important than loving people. Duanqing isn't a bad person, but he is someone who can share hardships but not prosperity. Lu Cheng is even more so. Many times, it is not that love has problems, it is that the person you love simply isn't worth it. Learning to identify someone's true nature early in a relationship is 10,000 times more important than fixing things afterwards. Fifth, always leave yourself a way out. No matter how good your current situation is, how stable your relationship is, please quietly and not because of pessimism, but because of clear-headedness. Finally, if you have friends around you who are going through similar predicaments, please forward this story to them, not to have them learn UA's tactics, but to let them know you don't have to endure it. You don't have to accept your fate. You deserve a better life. Thank you to every reader who has read this far. See you in the next story.